Today we're going to do a review and battery test on these three circular saws. We have the Milwaukee 7 1/4 brushless. The number's 2631-20. If you can't see it. We've got a Ridgid 7 1/4. The number is R8652. And the Ryobi here is P508. They all have the same blade. It's a Diablo 7 1/4 inch blade. The Ridgid and Milwaukee saw both are right cut saws, and the Ryobi is a left cut. I do not have precisely the same batteries, but I have as close as I could get. And as you can see, they're all on the chargers. They are fully charged. And so I have the Ridgid battery is a 4 AH high capacity. It's kind of their standard battery. Can't get this off one-handed. The Ryobi is a 3 AH. It's the plus HP, kind of their stronger version of a battery, but it's a little less amp hour. That's a 3. The Ridgid is a 4, and the Milwaukee is a 3 amp hour. This is kind of their standard as well. 3 amp hour Milwaukee red lithium battery. So what we're going to do is make various cuts with these saws on the same piece of wood, same amount of cuts, see how the saws perform, and we want to see which one of these batteries throws in the towel first. It's the Ridgid 4 amp hour or the 3 amp hour Ryobi plus HP, or this red lithium Milwaukee 3 amp hour battery. I'll set the camera up so we can make some cuts and see what happens. Okay, let's get these batteries on and cut some wood. Again, I'm going to make the same cuts. I'm not going to count my cuts, but I'm going to make the same cuts in the same piece of wood with each saw. We'll see how they cut, and we'll see which battery dies sooner. A couple other details. This Ryobi saw is brushless, and this Milwaukee saw is brushless, but the Ridgid saw, it's a 5th gen, what they call it. It says Gen 5X, but I do not believe this one is not brushless. Just so you have fair warning of not quite exactly apples to apples, but it's pretty close. The other difference is this Ridgid has a 4 amp hour battery, while the other two have 3 amp hour batteries. So I'm going to rip this old 2x4 first with all 3 of them. After 2 rips on a 2x4, the Ryobi's got 1 notch off the battery. Looks like the Ridgid's got full battery still, what it says. And the Milwaukee still says it has full battery. So we might have to do a little bit more before we wear these guys out. I've got this is a old chunk of oak, so this is going to be hard. I'm going to make 5 cuts with each saw on this, and see if that wears it down. This Ridgid saw is a lot more heavy duty feeling than the Ryobi saw, I would say. This one's a little lighter than the Ridgid saw, it feels like, and a little bit more ergonomically friendly. I like that the handle on this one has plenty of space to get your hand in. This Ridgid saw has kind of a real small area to stick your hand into. The brushless, or this here Ridgid or Milwaukee saw, does feel like it has a lot more power. The Ridgid feels like it has more power than the Ryobi. Tell you what makes a big deal with these saws is having a good blade on there. These blades had only been used for 1 or 2 cuts, and it makes the saw last a lot longer. The battery lasts a lot longer when you're not trying to plow through with a dull blade. Okay, where are we at now? We got half power on the Ryobi. 3 out of 4 on the Ridgid. 3 out of 4 on the Milwaukee. And down to 1 on the 1 line on the Milwaukee battery. Nope, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's going between 1 and 2. The Ridgid's got 3 still, and the Ryobi's got 2. It feels like the Ridgid is starting to lose RPMs. Got 1 bar flashing on the Ryobi. 2 bars on the Ridgid. 1 left on the Milwaukee. Yeah, they're still plugging along. Uh-oh, that was the first time that the Milwaukee shut down. Looks like that's it. It's got 1 bar flashing. No power. Was not able to complete that last 5 cuts. Let's see if these other guys can do it. Still going. Only 1 bar left on the Ridgid, but it is still cutting. And there goes the Ryobi. it was able to make maybe one more cut than the Milwaukee was. So that's it on the Ryobi and the Milwaukee. Another thing that I would like to say about these, just so you know, all of these sets were purchased in 2019 January, and so these batteries have maybe been charged 5 times each. I've mostly just used them to do these tests with, so there's been very little use or wear and tear on these batteries, and these saws are the same age. They've been used minimal. Most all of their use has been on this review here. So here we are, we have the Ryobi saw outlasted the Milwaukee saw by just a few cross cuts here, and the Ridgid saw is still cranking. So I'm going to make at least 10 or 15 more and see if it's close, but this one still has 2 bars on the battery. Just to make it fair too, a few other disclaimers here. This is a 4 amp hour battery on the Ridgid saw. The Milwaukee saw is a 3 amp hour battery, and the Ryobi saw is a 3 amp hour battery. So it does make sense that the Ridgid one would last a little longer. But on the other side, from what they say, the brushless saws are easier on your battery. This Milwaukee is brushless and the Ryobi is brushless. But this 5th generation Ridgid, I do not believe is brushless. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But it is interesting to see that it's outlasting these brushless saws. 1 more amp hour on the battery does make sense that it would last a little longer. I have heard from people that they say the Milwaukee 3 amp hour battery can last as long or longer than the 4 amp hour Ridgid. So it may depend on the tool, but it appears in this review here at least that the Ridgid is outlasting it. I'm going to make some more cuts here and see how much longer it can outlast it. Well, that was 12 more cuts. We're down to one out of 4 bars on that battery left. I'll make a few more cuts on this. Rough sawn 1x8. It did seem as though the Ridgid saw was losing RPMs a while ago, but it's still pushing through. That's about as far as I can go before I cut my fingers off. So this saw definitely outlasts them. It's down to 1 bar. I'll grab a piece of this oak. See if we can kill this guy, or kill the battery at least. I'm gonna rip this oak. It's a 1x white oak, so that is some hardwood. Woo! Sucker's still cranking. 1 bar left. See what else we can cut up here. Oh! That's about it. I think we're there. That's it. Finally got the Ridgid here. It's still wanting to come back to life, but I think that's it for the Ridgid. This thing significantly outlasts the other two. Yeah, that's it. So I didn't just make 5 more cuts with it. I made 10, 20, 30 cross cuts. I ripped the oak, 1 by white oak, made cross cuts on that. Ripped this 2 by yellow pine about 4 or 5 times here. And I'm really impressed. This Ridgid battery lasted a long time on this 5th generation saw. Again, they had the same blades, 4 amp hour battery, 5th generation, Ridgid. I gave the exact model number at the beginning of the video. Milwaukee brushless with a 3 amp hour battery versus the Ryobi brushless with the 3 amp hour HP battery. And in conclusion, I would say the Ridgid, obviously battery won as far as lasting the longest. The Milwaukee, hands down, is a more user-friendly saw. I like it. It's got this clip on it. None of the other ones had that. Just ergonomically, it was smooth. It had power, but it died first. So it did not make the best use of its 3 amp hour battery. The Ryobi was probably my last pick mostly because it's a left side cut. So if you're left-handed, you might like it, but I don't really like that it's always pulling you this way. Generally, a right-hander's cutting this side, and your board's falling off this way. So it's just a lot of taxing on your forearm here when you're trying to cut. So the Ridgid here worked well. The main things I don't like about it is the switch for the safety is kind of odd. It's not real smooth like the other two saws. And this place here where you stick your hand down in, there's enough room to get your fingers, but not much more. The Ryobi has more space, and the Milwaukee here has even more than that. So if you had gloves on or anything, you'd have a lot more room to work with this saw. Appreciate you watching. Please comment. Let me know what you think. If you have any of these saws or if you have any other input.